What happens when Hollywood's most respected legend meets late-night television's most controversial host? You won't believe what unfolds when Robert De Niro sits down with Bill Maher, and the conversation spirals into an explosive confrontation that leaves everyone speechless. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because you're not going to believe what unfolds. Last night's episode of Real Time started like any other, but within minutes, the atmosphere in that studio became electric with tension. Robert De Niro, the two-time Academy Award winner, known for his intense performances and unwavering principles, walked onto that stage, expecting a respectful dialogue about his latest projects and perhaps some light political commentary. What he got instead was Bill Maher at his most provocative. The trouble began almost immediately. Maher, with his characteristic smirk, opened with what seemed like innocent banter about De Niro's age and recent film choices. "Bobby, you're 80 years old, still making movies. At what point do you just, retire and let the younger generation take over?" The question hung in the air like a loaded gun, and you could see De Niro's jaw tighten slightly. De Niro's response was measured but firm. "Bill, I make movies because I have something to say. Age doesn't diminish passion or purpose." But Maher wasn't done. He leaned back in his chair with that infuriating grin and delivered the line that would ignite the powder keg. "Come on, Bobby. Isn't this just about staying relevant? I mean, your last few movies haven't exactly set the world on fire." The camera captured De Niro's face perfectly. That slow burn that every moviegoer recognizes from his most iconic roles. His voice dropped to that dangerous whisper. "Staying relevant? I've been relevant longer than you've been on television." The studio audience shifted uncomfortably as the temperature in the room seemed to rise 10 degrees. Maher, perhaps sensing he'd struck a nerve, decided to push even harder instead of backing down, setting the stage for what would become television history. But this was only the beginning, and what happened next would push both men past their breaking point. Maher, emboldened by the audience's nervous energy, decided to go for the jugular. "Look, Bobby, I get it. You're a legend, no question. But let's talk about your recent political rants. Don't you think some of your statements have been a bit unhinged?" The word hung in the studio like a death sentence. De Niro's eyes narrowed to slits, and anyone who knew anything about the actor could see the storm brewing behind them. "Unhinged?" De Niro repeated slowly, his voice carrying that unmistakable edge that had terrified audiences for decades. "Bill, you want to talk about unhinged? Let's talk about your comedy. When's the last time you made people laugh without punching down at someone?" The audience gasped audibly. This wasn't playful banter anymore. This was blood sport. Maher's face flushed red, his trademark smugness faltering for the first time. "Hey now, that's my show you're talking about. I've been doing this for 30 years. De Niro leaned forward, his presence suddenly filling the entire screen. 30 years of what, Bill? Cheap shots and bitter commentary? You think hiding behind comedy gives you a free pass to be cruel?" The camera operators scrambled to capture every angle as the tension reached a fever pitch. Maher, clearly rattled, but trying to maintain control, made his fatal mistake. "At least I don't mumble my way through forgettable movies while pretending to be some political sage." The words escaped his mouth before he could stop them, and the entire studio fell into deadly silence. De Niro stood up slowly, his chair scraping against the floor, with an ominous screech. "What did you just say to me?" The question came out like a growl, and even Maher seemed to realize he'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. The point of no return had arrived, and what happened next would shock everyone watching. The legendary actor's voice dropped to that bone-chilling whisper that had made him famous. "You want to talk about mumbling, Bill? Let me speak clearly so even you can understand." He stepped closer to Maher's desk, towering over the suddenly diminished host. "I've spent 50 years perfecting my craft, while you've spent 30 years perfecting your bitterness." Maher, desperately trying to regain control, stammered, "Bobby, come on, we're just having a conversation here." "No, we're not. De Niro cut him off with surgical precision. A conversation requires mutual respect, something you clearly don't possess. The camera captured every devastating word as De Niro continued his verbal assault. You sit behind this desk night after night, tearing down people who've accomplished more in a single film than you have in your entire career. The studio fell into complete silence as De Niro straightened his jacket with deliberate calm. You want unhinged? Here's unhinged. Thinking you can insult a guest on your own show and expect them to sit there and take it. His voice rose for the first time, filling the studio with righteous fury. I've worked with Scorsese, Coppola, the greatest directors who ever lived. And you're just another bitter comedian who peaked 20 years ago. Maher sat frozen, his face pale, as De Niro delivered the final blow. Find yourself a new guest, Bill. This conversation is over. The two-time Oscar winner turned his back on the host and walked off the stage with the dignity of a man who had just defended not only himself, but every artist who'd ever been dismissed by small-minded critics. The audience erupted as De Niro disappeared into the wings, leaving Maher speechless and utterly humiliated.